My name is Vernon Peterson, and I live in Rice Lake, Wisconsin now. I grew up in a small town called Amory, Wisconsin, which is about 2,000 population. It was a great Norwegian community for miles and miles. It was all Norwegians. There was a couple of Swedes that were visiting, but they stayed there. But the Norway was the big part.
And your ancestors from Norway, they came by Trondheim. Do you know anything more about where your family comes from?
No, we toured Norway about 5 years ago, my wife and I, when we retired. And we were on a bus tour, so I could not get to Trondheim, and I think I've got that pronounced close. I wanted to see that, because that's where my grandparents and my great-grandparents came from. And they come across in a boat, and I cannot imagine traveling in those days on a boat. And then when you get to our country over here, I mean, it was still wilderness. It was small roads and just rural farms. And it was tough times for them. But all the neighbors helped each other. They worked together. Back then, the small farms, everybody helped. You'd get about a half a dozen farmers together, and they would hay, and they would do corn, they would do grain, they would do whatever. And if they needed some help in their buildings, they all were carpenters. They all knew how to take care of themselves. And they had to be, because there was no great people to do a lot of help. They had to do their things on their own. They were tough people.
Yeah. Do you know when your grandparents went from Norway, and do you also know their names?
All I can remember is my grandparents was Anton and Christine, and back then they had a name of Becken, because my dad is where I got the Peterson name. So it was a great life. I grew up on a small farm. My parents never taught me how to speak Norwegian. I wanted to learn that.
Why didn't they?
They chose, at that time, they thought we should be learning English. We were in northern Wisconsin, and the school systems were speaking English, and they didn't want to confuse us. The other part, they could also talk Norwegian when they didn't want the kids to know anything, so they'd have fun that way. They'd laugh, and they'd tell us what they were talking about, but I don't think they ever told us the truth.
Do you know what year your grandparents went from Trondheim?
Well, my grandparents had to come here in the 1800s, because I was born, I'm 73, I was born in 41, and I was very fortunate because my grandparents lived with my parents on the farm. Matter of fact, when they had to quit farming with their health, my mother and dad moved back on the farm, and they lived with me and my parents for many years. So that's something that most people don't get a chance to learn, what their grandparents were really like, what they know. So they taught me a bunch of stuff.
You don't know more specifically when in the 1800s the boat went, or what boat it was?
No, I'm sorry, I don't. My sister, who has studied the Norwegian culture in our family much more than I have, so she is the authority on how our people got over to northern Wisconsin.
Yeah. This community here was there was a lot of Norwegians, but what was the culture here more Norwegian than American?
Today, you mean, or?
No, when you were a young man.
Oh yeah, it was. Everybody spoke Norwegian on Main Street in the town. Back then, everybody would come to town on a Friday night. They would buy groceries. They would exchange goods from the farm, whether we were bringing in fall stuff from the garden and selling it, or we'd trade eggs on the farm for groceries in town. I mean, it was a culture that today people could not understand how that worked, but it worked very good.
Is the Norwegian community still strong here?
Oh yes. They have the 17. Mai celebration, 17th of May, your Independence Day.
Yeah.
and everybody has lefse. My wife is a great cook, and she and her sisters get together and they make all kinds of sandbakkels and fattigmann and all kinds of different Norwegian dishes. And I think they're still made over in Norway, but I don't know.
No. Do you know anything about relatives in Norway still living?
No, I don't. I've heard, and my wife did some email work. She's much better at that than I am. And she was looking for her family, which is in Sweden, north of Stockholm. So she was also working with my sister, talking and writing to my ancestors over there. I'd love to meet them, but I just haven't had the opportunity.